Hey everybody, the Game 2K2 here again, and I'm here to do a portion of the show which I like to call the Nutshell Review. These are one-take, unscripted reviews where I just give my personal opinions on movies, shows, music, whatever I feel like reviewing pretty much. Video games as well. To kick this segment of my show off, I'm actually going to be doing something a little Halloween related since we're right around the corner from the holiday. Now, I've already reviewed all of the Halloween movies, but I feel like reviewing a portion of the movies that I feel I really want to give my opinions on, and that's the different actors and stuntmen that have played Michael Myers over the years. I'm going to be reviewing their performances as well as the masks that they wore in the movies. So what better way to kick this off than with the first one, Nick Castle. Was Nick Castle for the majority of the movie. Tommy Lee Wallace and even Deborah Hill also took on the role. Tommy Lee Wallace was the Michael Myers that was in the closet scene. And then Deborah Hill played Michael for a brief moment when Tommy, the character of Tommy, is looking across the street and Michael is standing there staring at him. It's kind of noticeable that it's Deborah Hill because Michael is a little shorter, because Deborah Hill is much shorter than Nick Castle and Tommy Lee Wallace, who are around 6 feet tall each. Now with Nick Castle, I'll review just him since he's the one playing the role through the majority of the film. And I just love Nick Castle's performance. It's one of my favorites throughout the series. It's probably my second favorite throughout the series. Nick Castle was just so fluid in his movements. And really, when you look at Nick Castle's performance, there really, besides the murdering aspect of Michael Myers, there really shouldn't be anything else that's really scary about Michael Myers, but there's something about Nick Castle's movements that just makes him scary. You know, because when you look at it in context, all Nick Castle does for a majority of the shots is stand and walk. That's about it. It shouldn't be scary at all, but the way Nick Castle performs it makes it much scarier than it probably should be. And I think that's what makes Michael Myers so special amongst other villains and killers that have been introduced in films before Halloween. And, you know, he brought a human element that wasn't quite there for characters similar to Michael Myers. And I think because it was a human being underneath that mask, doing all of the killing and all of that, just made him a scarier character. And then you have to consider the mask as well. The mask, the original Halloween mask was, as everyone knows, a Captain Kirk mask that was redesigned by Tommy Lee Wallace, the production designer on Halloween. He spray painted it a bluish white color, opened up the eye holes a little more, combed back the hair a little bit, and tore off the eyebrows, and just a bunch of other things that he did with the mask that just really gave the mask that expressionless and cold appearance that it has in the film that makes it really creepy to stare at. It's not necessarily a scary mask by any means, but there's something very creepy about it. There's something unsettling about the mask, and that expressionless appearance does make it, does give it the effect that they were looking for in the movie. So overall, if I had to rate Nick Castle's performance, it's my second favorite throughout the series, and I just really, really enjoyed the way he played Michael Myers in the first film. Then we move on to the second film. The second film was the Michael Myers role was taken over by an actual stuntman, Dick Warlock. Dick Warlock is actually a very well-respected stuntman, and he just was, as much as he's loved for the role, out of all the performances, he's probably near the bottom of my list as far as the way he performed the role. I felt Michael Myers was way too robotic in the movie. You know, he lost all of the human element that was present in the first film, and some fans have actually said that was on purpose, because Michael had been shot 6 times, so it's almost like a zombie walking in the second film, and it doesn't really work for me. I felt Michael was creepier and more scary when he was more fluid and moved more like a human being. The one element that's really scary about Dick Warlock's performance is not necessarily his performance, but that mask. It's the exact same mask from the first movie, a little worn out due to years in between the first movie and the sequel. And it also has a wider appearance because Dick Warlock's head is wider than, or face, I should say. His face is wider than Nick Castle's, which gave the mask a much different appearance than it had in the first film. And for some reason, the mask just appears creepier to me in the second film, and it gives Michael almost like an angry look in a way, and it was very effective. The mask was very effective. It was just Dick Warlock's kind of robotic performance that I felt Michael Myers lost all of his I guess you could say creepiness that he had in the first film. So Dick Warlock overall, near the bottom of my list. Not the total bottom. We'll get to that one soon. But not nearly as good as Nick Castle's performance. And then we get on to Halloween 4, which is again Michael Myers is played by another really respected stuntman, and probably one of the most respected stuntmen in Hollywood. In fact, he was put into the Stuntman Hall of Fame as well, and that's George Wilbur. George Wilbur was cast. They had decided to change Michael Myers a little bit, even though Michael Myers was relatively tall in the first movie at 6 feet tall. They wanted him slightly bigger, to appear bigger and a little scarier, along the lines of Jason in the Friday the 13th series, in terms of size. So they cast George P. Wilbur, who's around 6'3", but they wanted him to appear even bigger, so George Wilbur is wearing hockey pads under the overalls for Michael. And George Wilbur is on the bottom of my list for this as far as Halloween 4 is concerned, because I just felt George Wilbur took everything that Dick Warlock did for the role, but took nothing of what Nick Castle did. George Wilbur just moves like a humongous Frankenstein in this movie, and the hockey pads under the overalls does not help the look for his character. Bit of a creepier appearance for Michael in this one. You know, they give him the burn scars from the fire of the second movie. The only thing that does not pass for creepy or even the least bit scary is the mask. It's a very flimsy mask that they created for Halloween 4. They had given the previous mask to Dick Warlock, which they realized was a mistake. So they had to create the mask for the fourth film from scratch. So they actually created a mask that actually looked a little bit too much like William Shatner. They obviously knew that the original mask was made from a William Shatner mask, so they made a mask that actually looked strangely like him. And unfortunately, the misconception there is that the original William Shatner mask that was used, if you were to ever look at it, looks nothing like William Shatner. And that was actually a joke that John Carpenter really liked to tell. And so they kind of missed the point and actually made a mask that looks eerily like William Shatner. And they also missed the point of the mask from the first movie as well, you know, where the first mask had little to no eyebrows, was fairly expressionless. This mask has these big, gigantic eyebrows and just the clown-like smile on its face that's just odd, you know. And really, the mask just looks flimsy. It's really thin compared to the first mask, which is really noticeable whenever Michael moves. And also the hair is slicked back, and it's nowhere near as effective as the first movie, and that's definitely not good. So as far as George Wilbur in the fourth film, I don't like his performance. That performance is at the bottom of my list in terms of all the performances combined, and it's unfortunate too, considering it was George Wilbur's first outing as the character. Then we move on to Halloween 5. George Wilbur decided not to reprise the role So it was given to another stuntman, Don Shanks, who's another well-respected stuntman in the business. Don Shanks, a little shorter than George Wilbur. He's around 6'1", about 2 inches shorter. But Don Shanks is just this big, muscular, intimidating-looking guy who, even though being 6'1", because of his build, looks about 6'4". And if you ever see the guy in person, he's in his 60s, and yet he still looks huge. With Don Shanks, he wasn't given much direction from the director for Halloween 5. He was pretty much just told to walk like he's walking through water. That's not much direction. In fact, if you're a stuntman playing this role, the direction probably doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. And the director was Dominique Girard, who I'm stunned even was directing this film. It was his first major film, and unfortunately, it was his first of not too many. With Don Shanks, I actually really like the performance. I actually like it a lot better than Dick Warlock and George Wilbur from Halloween 2 and 4, mainly because I felt Don Shanks really created the intimidating presence. He's a little bit robotic, but he's not nearly as robotic as Warlock or Wilbur. And really just his intimidating size just gave Michael a much scarier presence. Unfortunately, I can't say the same about the mask. Unfortunately, it's another really poor mask used for Halloween 5 because the mask from Halloween 4 did not fit Don Shanks as well as it fit George Wilbur. They had to change the mask to fit around his head, so it's a thinner appearance with an angrier look. I guess they took inspiration on the hair from Don Shanks because Don Shanks has long hair. So they gave the mask longer hair, and it just is not a great-looking mask. It doesn't even look like a sturdy mask at that. It has a harder appearance than the one from 4, but it's made out of Velcro, which gave it this uneven look, like it was patched together. So yeah, with Don Shanks, I feel it's a better performance, movement-wise, as Michael, but unfortunately the mask does kind of take away a lot from the performance, and it's unfortunate. Then we move on to Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, which is, again, the role is taken up by George Wilbur, reprising the role from Halloween 4. And this is my, actually kind of the middle of the list as far as my favorites go for the series. I felt George Wilbur really got the role on this movie. You know, he was no longer as robotic as he was in Halloween 4. Still a little robotic in some scenes, but he just... I don't know whether it was the director or George Wilbur just packed on size from the 4th movie, but he just had this scarier appearance to him in the 6th film. And, you know, it was just so good, and, you know, he played the role well. And the mask in this film is... It's also kind of middle of the road for me. I really want to like it, but again, I kind of hate it in a way. I like their attempt to recreate the effects of the first mask for this one. It does have a harder appearance to it. The mask looks like concrete when it's sitting still. It doesn't have like a rubber mask look to it in close-ups, which I felt had a really good effect. The only thing that's kind of a setback is the ears, and I know that sounds funny, but the ears on this mask, they just stand out. They poke right out and just gives Michael a really goofy look. Kind of like the ears on the Mad Magazine character. And then we move on to... Well, actually, overall, with George Wilbur in the 6th film, I like his performance a lot better in Halloween 6 than I do 4. Much improved performance, and I really would have liked to seen what he would have done if he had taken on the role again. But unfortunately, he got older, and I think he left the stunt work shortly after that. But then we move on to Halloween H2O. Now, Halloween H2O abandons the storylines from 4, 5, and 6. So they pretty much made it a direct sequel to Halloween 2, and some have even taken it as a direct sequel to the first movie. So in that regards, they went with someone with a similar build to Nick Castle. Someone who was not overly muscular, still tall in a lot of ways. Chris Durant, who takes up the role, is about 6'2". So he's still fairly tall, but he has a thinner build, similar to Nick Castle's build, to make it more consistent with the first movie. A lot of people give Chris Durant a lot of flack for this role, mainly because he had never seen a Halloween movie until he got the role. And I really felt Chris Durant brought a sense of originality to the character's movements that was really needed. He brought along a lot of similar movements that Nick Castle brought to the role, and he did a lot of it. Through his own movements and all of his own thinking. And I felt that it was more original with Michael Myers, and I felt Michael was actually, while not as physically imposing as Wilbur or Don Shanks, he had a creepier vibe to him, and the performance in general really mimicked what John Carpenter wanted for the first movie in general, where it was this man behind a mask, but he was just pure evil that could not be stopped, no matter how much you hit him, no matter how much you stabbed him or punched him. He just kept going, and that's what Chris Durant brings to the role. And then there's the mask, and the mask has received the most controversy from the movie because there's actually technically 4 or 5 masks used for the movie. Obviously, there's a CGI mask, which is completely terrible. We'll leave that out of this. The first mask has been called, by some fans, the baby boy mask. It looks like a little boy, the original mask. And that was the mask they had used for the first half of principal photography. And they had a screening at Daly's, which is where a lot of big screenings happens for any major release that is in the middle of production. And they did it in front of a lot of Halloween fans, and one Halloween fan stood up in the middle of Daly's and said, "That is not Michael Myers' mask." And that's when all panic ensued on the production, and they decided to change the mask halfway through production. However, it was not immediately the hero mask that you see throughout the picture like most people think. It was actually changed to the Halloween 6 mask, which is viewed at the beginning of the movie when Michael first appears. That's actually the mask from Halloween 6, redesigned a little bit to fit Chris Durant. And that mask in general just didn't work in general because Chris Durant doesn't have the big muscular build of Wilbur or Shanks, so the mask looked a little bit too big for him. Then there was the hero mask, the mask seen throughout the movie, which is designed to look like a cross between the Halloween 6 mask and the original mask. Very much the upper half, from the top of the head to the nose is very much mimicked from the Halloween 6 mask, and then the mouth is from the original mask. And I actually like this mask. A lot of people have their own opinions on it. Some felt it was too tight because you could see Michael Myers' eyes throughout the entire film, but I thought that actually worked for the character. I felt since there's only one feature that you can see from the character, and that's the eyes, why not see them throughout the picture? Because it really makes you think on what this character might be thinking. And the fact that you can't see the rest of his expression, you can only see his eyes, just really brings along that creepy effect that I felt Michael needed for this movie. The mask, in general, is probably my third favorite in the series. I actually really liked the hero mask used in the movie, and I liked Chris Durant's performance. And that's pretty much how I feel about that. Then we move on to my favorite performance as Michael Myers, and that's Brad Laurie in Halloween Resurrection. Brad Laurie was a fan of the Halloween franchise in general. He loved horror films, and he loved the Halloween franchise, and he studied Nick Castle, Dick Warlock, and Chris Durant since those were the 3 people he had to study, since 4, 5, and 6 were not part of the canon anymore for the Halloween franchise. And he just really brought a great performance to the character. It was a terrible movie, but his performance was great. And Brad Laurie just has a more intimidating appearance than Chris Durant did. Again, Chris Durant was built more like Nick Castle, so it was a little thinner. Brad Laurie is just huge in this film. He's the same height as 6'2", but he looks gigantic because of his thicker build. And then there's the mask. The mask, despite what people might think, is actually an almost 100% identical replica to the original mask. I love this mask. It's actually ties with the original mask in terms of my favorites throughout the series. And really the mask is just... It kind of does deviate a little bit from the mask because they added a little more emotion. They added a few more folds. I think I hit my microphone. I do apologize. They added a bit more folds in the mask under the nose, which gave Michael, when the camera was panned up, a bit of an angry look. But I felt that really worked, especially for Brad Laurie's performance. I felt it was awesome. And I really liked that mask, and I like Brad Laurie's performance. So in terms of performances and the mask, combined, my favorite performance, Brad Laurie, just amazing in the role. And I really wish the series had continued on, because Brad Laurie had actually expressed interest in being part of Halloween 9, which was actually in discussion for a short period of time, but was scrapped for the remake. And that's where we're going next, is Halloween, the 2007 Halloween and its sequel, Halloween 2. Both Michael Myers roles, both films played by Tyler Mane. And Tyler Mane, if I had to pick a spot for him, I say around Dick Warlock and George Wilbur in terms of my liking of his role. And there's nothing really against Tyler Mane in general. Tyler Mane is a good actor. If you've ever seen him act in other films, he's an amazing actor. But it's his size. And that's nothing against him. Tyler Mane stands around 6'8" or 6'9". Roughly 6 to 7 inches taller than the other actors who had taken on the role from Halloween 4 all the way to Resurrection. And really, with Tyler Mane, his performance as Michael in the remake was okay. It wasn't terrible, but I felt his size kind of made it a bit funny. And I know Rob Zombie was trying to compete with the other films, like the Friday the 13th and all that, trying to make Michael gigantic. But with Michael, the size in general just became laughable after a while, because you wonder, you wonder what this big guy is thinking behind this mask. And really, I think in general, the size element made him less scary. I felt it was more scary when Michael was normal size. Yes, 6'2" and 6'3" is tall, but it's not too tall. 6'8", his head is nearly reaching the ceiling, and it just ruins, the creepy element that Michael had in previous films, and makes it more funny than actually scary. Then there's the mask in the remake and the sequel, and the mask in the remake is a great mask. Probably in terms of mask, it ranks pretty high up there in the list. They tried, obviously it looked a little bit different because it's this huge gigantic mask that has to fit Tyler Mane, so it does look different in that regards, but it's actually probably the closest that next to Resurrection that any mask had gotten to the original Halloween. And it's just just a really good mask, and I really like the mask, and I like the fact that they added the decaying mask, the decay elements to the mask in the latter half of the film. I thought that was a really nice touch. Then we have its sequel. I guess you can call it half a mask in the sequel. It's supposed to be the same mask from the remake, and really, I don't like it. I felt that taking the mask apart, kind of ripping it to pieces, just took away any creepy or scary element that the mask had. And the character of Michael just loses all of his scary elements anyways when you actually reveal the face. Because now you know what he's thinking, now you know what he looks like, and it just ruins the entire thing. You know, yeah, obviously they showed his face in the first film, but that was brief. And it was that brief moment, that brief glimpse of his face in the first film that made him scary in that brief second. Seeing it pretty much throughout the majority of the film is just... It loses all of its creepiness, and the character just turns into a normal guy. And that's not good. Yes, I do agree. I find it creepy when Nick Castle brought a human element to the role, but when you lose the mask in general, that creepy element just is completely lost. And that's pretty much it for the most part. I'm not sure what's going to happen to the series in the future. They are doing a Halloween 3 for the remake franchise. Not sure whether Tyler Mane is taking up the role or not. Rob Zombie wants nothing to do with it. But I'm really interested to see what happens with this character in the future. Yes, they did ruin the character in Halloween 2 for the remake franchise, and I'm really interested to see how they recover from that. But yeah, that's my review of all the actors, stuntmen that have donned the Michael Myers mask and the overalls. But I do want to thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you next time.